Welcome to the latest episode of Politely Pushy. I'm your host, Eric Chummy, and today I've got a very special guest. He talks a lot. He talks smart. He says provocative things. His name is Tomás Puig. I've known him for a while now. He's the CEO and co-founder of Alembic. He's been at the center of marketing, data, technology for many years. That's what Alembic's all about. It's an upstart technology firm. It's funded by angel investors and major institutional investors. So Tomás, welcome to the show. Welcome to Politely Pushy.
Thanks for having me. It's good to chat again.
So you're doing so much right now. In some of our conversations in the past, I've been mind blown, right? Like what you're talking about, what you're doing, it scares me a little bit in terms of where marketing and technology and advertising and data, where all that's going right now. It makes me wonder what's happening to this industry, what's happening to the future. And it makes me really nervous on behalf of these bigger companies who are flying blind in a lot of ways. And there's just a huge cliff that's about, they're about to run over this huge cliff. So I'm just going to start right away. This Christmas, this holiday season, this is the age of the influencer, right? This is the age of content creation, skipping traditional media. They're getting so much more money now. That's where all the advertising is starting to move, especially for these big companies. What are you seeing in that?
It's really interesting and everything's kind of cyclical. I think what ends up happening is everybody's talking about this is the age of the influencer. The age of the influencer has actually never ended. Product endorsements, product placements within the TV show Friends, any of this stuff have existed for a long time. People have talked about how to insert media into ad blocked environments, right? Or people who are anti-ad for a long time. And so it's, I would say this is the era of where programmatic failed, not that influencers rose. And so I think you're getting
Say that again. Say that again so everyone hears you.
Well, I'm saying like this is more of the era of the failure of interest-based and programmatic advertising, and that the fact that it is platform dependent rather than influencers are a brand new thing that everybody came up with yesterday. I mean, George Clooney got paid what? How many tens of millions of dollars to do Nespresso for forever? That's an influencer play.
Right.
And so it's just you're just inserting them into different pieces of medium. So it's so I think that the movement to influencers is, we talk about there's a lot of complexities that go into this. Eric, do you know how people price an influencer and what the value is?
The pricing of the influencer has been a fascinating conversation because I've talked to a lot of them. A lot of the influencers themselves don't know what the price should be. I have a lot of friends who are making money being influencers, and they come to me saying, "Hey, what should I price? Because I think I'm being lowballed. I think whatever." One guy was like, "Hey, I did this stuff for a major brand, but this brand's got a real bad reputation, and I was getting a lot of flack from my Instagram followers. So I went back to this brand. It's a household name. And they said, hey," and he said, "you got to pay me 10 times what you're paying me because my followers don't like you and I'm getting a lot of pushback." And they said, okay, fine. They added a 0 and they paid him. So if you get 10x just by asking, then who knows what the price is?
We know what the price is. I mean, people have been doing media evaluations for that. So think about it like this. When topical, when crypto.com buys the naming rights to the stadium in LA and it becomes crypto.com stadium for $700 million over 10 years, you think nobody's done valuation for that?
But that's the value of the stadium. Right? We know what stadium prices are.
But it is very similar to an influencer. You are treading on the name and doing association. So think about influencer pricing like this. It's actually fairly simple. One, you have what we call the endorsement fee. The endorsement fee varies based off of the height of the influencer, right? It's just a flat fee. Like, I even want to be associated with your brand. This is what you pay me. So it's based off of the size of the influencer, the whether the influencer is known for being only an influencer or whether they have a giant amount of skills outside of it. If you have a top athlete, they are at the pinnacle of what they do. And so their respect level is much higher than, say, somebody who might just be a hobbyist who's overgrown, right? So where are you in the game? So there's a flat fee that happens. Then there's what we call the lockup fee. So if you have a brand that's a shoe brand that's buying from you, no other shoe brand is going to want to be associated with you for at least 6 to 12 months. So even before you do any posts, there's 2 sets of valuation and charges that need to take place. By the way, we only work with very, very large influencers. This is not a micro influencer conversation, right?
What's your definition from micro to large? What's that cutoff point?
Probably, I would say at least 1 million impressions a month across your media sets,
Okay.
right? Like it has to be a material amount of traffic. Um, After that, media creation fee for any media that's created and generated. So third piece, right? So if you're doing a custom piece, say somebody does let's take an example. You know that band, okay, I can't remember the name that always does the amazing music videos. That was like started with the treadmill thing and then they had the paint
Yeah,
exploding.
yeah, the treadmill. I know who it is. It's funny, we remember the treadmill thing, but I forget the name of the band.
So all the videos that came afterwards were sponsored by like Toyota or big brands.
Right,
They're paying for the production of that media, not just the impressions, right?
right.
So whatever it is to produce for the campaign set is also a charge. Then you charge by the performance, impressions, and expected media value. So what happens with influencers is everybody gets locked into this very like, oh yes, how much impressions do you send me? I'm like, that has nothing to do with it, right? Now, this is the same stuff that talent has been doing for a long time. CAA, Wasserman, all those folks
Right.
have been doing this for forever. They just don't talk about it, right? So you're asking how influencers price. That shows the immaturity of micro and mid-sized influencers as opposed to a lack of understanding about how this stuff works in general. So you talk about the age of the influencer. I'd say definitely the media mix is moving that way to that. But the other thing to remember is it hasn't changed that much because every influencer now is their own broadcaster. So if you looked at TV stations back in the day and you had Channel 7 and it was the local station, whatever they ran is what you got.
Right.
Influencers now, they have Instagram, they have a Patreon, they have all these channels. They're creating content. They're actually a broadcaster in and of themselves. And so all you're doing is buying broadcast media from a specific set. If you want to look at people who've been doing this for decades, sports teams have been doing these type of deals for decades. All influencers are doing is taking the playbook from sports, redoing it, and using a different set of transmissions channels.
So when you see stories like in Forbes, it's like selling toys is changing, right? For decades, we know toys are promoted heavily on TV companies, especially during the holidays. And all of a sudden now it's, hey, we're only doing influencers. Like when you see stories like that, what do you think about that? How are you working with the brands to figure out what they should be paying? Are you working with the influencers to figure out what they should be charging? How are you centered? How are you positioning your company in that spectrum?
We do both, right? So we work with the brands, and we can see some data from their stuff about the we call it unstructured anonymized data, like these giant sets of data out in the world. And then we work with influencers, and we have one influencer that does 1 billion impressions a month.
1 billion a month.
A
Yeah.
billion a month.
How many followers do you need to get 1 billion impressions a month?
Probably somewhere in the realm of 200 to 400 million.
Okay. In total, across your platforms.
Across platforms.
Yeah.
By the way, he does that billion on a single platform, which is crazy.
Right.
So I think that what you get is you get this wide breadth. And look, practically selling toys became different when e-commerce existed. Absolutely. Right? All they're doing is talking about changing their media mix.
Yeah. Yeah. So then what do you say to these big media companies? Right. I used to work at these big media companies. It's what are they going to do to compete? Because they're offering just one option, one channel, right? Channel 7 was a great option 30 years ago. Now Channel 7 is one of 1 million options that companies can pick from. And brands don't need to go to big media at all. They could completely avoid them, pay them nothing.
They're going to go to all of the above. I doubt if I looked deep into that person's media mix that they did not do a single TV buy. I think that some of this is hyperbolic.
Right. So when they say in these articles, hey, I spent nothing on TV. I spent zero and I'm never spending zero.
You spent nothing on TV, including across all of Asia, Europe, and Africa.
Yeah, that's highly doubtful.
You get what I'm saying. So I think that, like,
right.
Yes, communication mechanisms become obsolete all the time. You don't sell direct on telephone anymore because nobody picks up.
Right.
Right. So you're not getting as many, unless you're in that upper age range, you're not going to do it. Door to door is also not as big a thing anymore. We didn't cease to be able to do business because of that. And these other media channels that are doing stuff, it's the syndication channels that are going to have a hard time. But the large brands, right? Your Comcasts, your HBOs, your Disney, they ain't hurting. What do you think Disney Plus is going to charge to do a product placement in one of their shows coming up?
It's going to be a lot. It's going to be pretty similar to a typical Disney show.
Right. So I'm
Yeah.
just saying, you're
Yeah.
only talking about difference in communication mechanism sections. And then you're talking about marketers getting more sophisticated again.
So you mentioned channels getting obsolete, right? Brings me to Facebook, right? They're quickly, and we know, so they're getting much older, right? It's one thing to have older and older people show up on the platform. It's another thing to just simply lose the young people altogether. They either don't sign up, they cancel their membership, they cancel their accounts, and they're moving on to, it was Twitter, it was Snapchat, it was Instagram, it's TikTok. So when you look at Facebook now as a platform, are you advising some of your brands like, hey, you know what? Just don't even waste your time here. This is just not where you're trying to get people, depending on the brand.
I think that there is a tendency among the media and analysts to make everything a false binary, right? And so, like, being a CMO, looking at this stuff, I did it for a number of years. It's really much more like running a stock portfolio, right? When you have a stock portfolio, it's going to be a mix of bonds, stocks, foreign, domestic. You want some diversity there. You're not going to abandon. You're going to choose allocations, right? So I would say if you are a brand that is focused at 34 and under, I would lower my allocation to Facebook itself and make sure that I'm heavily augmenting on TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram to make up for any audience that may naturally move from that platform. But it doesn't mean you're going to abandon the entire thing altogether. And so I think it's you wait and move these risks over time. And so, yes, I would say that probably a modification of your media mix and portfolio management needs to occur.
But it's going down, right? It's not going up. It's hard to imagine when
for that's them all you it's going up, right? Like, definitely, I'd say Facebook is trying to prevent the inevitable that happens anytime. So let's use something that's easier for audiences to understand on the aggregate, right? Think about bands, right? Music you listen to. The number of bands that have survived careers through every age generation, right? In the world, you could see Green Day still keeps making some hit singles. Snoop Dogg still keeps making some hit singles. Dr. Dre, right? You can count them maybe on one hand.
Yeah, they're basically completely non-existent. Yeah,
they
come and go.
Everything else becomes cohorts.
Yeah.
So people who grew up in the 80s, right? You might have some people now who like 80s music, but they love David Bowie. They love all these things. In the 90s, grunge, Nirvana, the birth of the early rap scene, etc.
I like your cohort analogy. It just sticks with you. That's your cohort for the rest of your life. That's
right. So Facebook is part of a cohort. The younger cohort, you can see the separation. That younger cohort has moved to Instagram and TikTok. And so you're just going to track along with it. And then you're constantly going to do it and make sure you modify stuff. And there's very clear delineations there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like the social media as a band cohort, right? So the Facebook age was sort of that like 10-year age range, what that was, or 10 or 15 age range. And now the newer ones, it's like, hey, the bands that I listen to, I'm 37, right? I'm in that perfect Facebook cohort. And okay, but now everyone who's half my age, they're not listening to the same music as me, and they're not on the same social media as me. I like the band analogy.
Yeah, and that's why I use it, is because it's much easier to think about, like, man, it's so easy to look at this company and be like, oh, I'm so upset that they're doing it. I'm just like, okay, you're going through your natural progression as a corporation. Great.
Right.
I'm going to change my media mix as your performance improves. If Facebook rocks it out, releases a new product, and starts doing amazing under 24 again, we will move the media mix back.
But my guess is it's been going down every single year for you in that age group.
Oh, I mean, we've clearly see the delineation now, and that matches all public surveys and their own internal release stocks that we've seen. We've seen that, but remember, it is still super healthy in Instagram. So Meta is still fine in that age range. Meta as a company.
Right.
Right? Facebook, the platform, is not, but you ask why they're changing the Meta thing and everything else. Now who's going to care if Facebook goes down as long as Instagram makes up for the audience set?
What do you think about the copycats, right? When we know TikTok is the hot thing for the teenagers. I mean, I got on TikTok this year. When we know TikTok's hot, but now it's like, oh, YouTube and Instagram and they're all trying to copy what TikTok is doing. Do you like that approach? Do you think it's tacky, people see through it, or it's like, hey, if that works, do it? Or is it just the cohort's already gone at that point?
So let me, I can't screen share here, but I would. So let me just read you some of the numbers. We did actually a public survey that actually came in like a couple weeks ago. And we always check what the social media account build out is, right? So we want to know by demographic how many people use what social stuff. And
Right.
we found that in the younger demos, we like under, and this is a 1,500 person sample size per demographic, right? So it's a huge data set. 64% under 24 said they had TikTok. More than Facebook.
Yeah. I believe
Think
that.
about that. 64% of 24 and under people have a TikTok account. Why would I not make that part of my media mix?
Right.
How do I
Mandatory.
even if you're a business that deals with older folks like mortgage, whatever, you still want to make sure you future proof that you're even in consideration when the younger set ages into buying range. So you'd be a fool not to put in the media mix.
Which, no, I don't think anyone's saying you don't put them in the mix, but when you think about like when Instagram is trying to do their copycat of TikTok and YouTube's got shorts, Instagram's got reels, all this stuff that is the TikTok copycats, do you think that's going to work?
Oh man, iPhone never Android never copied iPhone. It was a terrible idea. Everybody hated it. Right? Like, come on, man. Like, this has been going on for forever. Everybody copies every feature. I think that at some point they make the platforms too complex, right?
Right.
And so they see they can't be everything for everyone at all time. And so I think it's just gonna be one of those things of where like Facebook wants to be the content internet, right? The platform itself, right? It wants to be the place where everybody has to be.
Right.
But it's like pretending you're King Lear. You know what I mean? Go scream into the storm for me. Come back. So it's just it's we have to keep this macro view as we talk through this stuff because I know a lot of people who work at Facebook and some of them are very nice people and yes, it does a lot of stuff and they have some things, but it is one section of the media mix. More is still spent on TV than Facebook.
That's a good reminder. I think people forget that. I think people
But that's where this
forget.
conversation goes, right?
Yeah.
And you're just like, dude, like if I'm spending 67 million in media a quarter, I can test anything I want. And I'll just put the money where the performance is.
Right.
Now the problem is more that like this gets to the other side. People get too comfortable in their media mix models and do not update and test often enough.
Or they barely change it. They move it around a couple of percent.
Exactly. But you should be constantly iteratively testing. And the problem with everybody in marketing is they feel personally affronted whenever a single test doesn't work. Only 1 out of every 10 tests in marketing should be working. If you have a better than 10% hit rate, you're not testing enough.
What's some examples of tests that you are either doing yourself or you've done in the past that you were surprised worked?
B2B advertising on Instagram. Did not expect it to work at all. Within several topics and ranges, actually incredibly effective depending on what you're doing. Data center people love posting pictures of cool looking data centers.
Yeah, it's visual. Take advantage of that.
Visual. So there's a whole like data center culture of people who post cool stuff and like there's a subreddit called engineering porn is the name of the subreddit. Just all these amazing objects moving and everything. You've got a huge number of engineers and everything that follow that stuff. And so if you're doing B2B engineering software, it works. Most people would be like, you're going to do B2B on Instagram? You're insane. Highly effective, much cheaper than doing it other places sometimes.
I like that example. What is an example of this test that you did that you thought this is definitely going to work, but we're going to test it because we test everything and it just was a complete bomb, complete failure?
Google AdWords every time.
Really?
So I have an adage I use. The more mature the channel, the less likely you are to have good, cheap wins. Because what happens is everybody starts looking at it, and then it's going to just go price per performance, and anything competitive is going to just pushed to the point where it almost pays back. So if
Right.
you're,
It's like perfectly, it's classic, capital markets, it's classic economics, right? The
it is
supply and
working
demand
as
are
it should,
perfectly evened out.
right? It is working as it should, right? People are
Yeah.
bidding it up to the point of almost no return, and then there's low inventory because there's only so much search volume within a certain term, and then you're all just getting a little section of it. TV, same way. TV ads are expensive because we know it works in the right situations and the right media. And so what happens is that anytime you're testing more mature channels, it's unlikely you're going to find something undiscovered.
So Gary Gensler, the new chair of the SEC, spoke last month about the use of predictive data analytics, right, on financial sites and the threats to investors. And we see this, right? We know the nudges that exist, right? Nudges, they had this positive connotation. Hey, we're trying to help people make better decisions. But at some point, it does cross the line to, well, who decides what's a good decision and what's a bad decision? Who decides what we're nudging and who's making money off of it? Because yeah, maybe a brokerage firm, hey, we want to encourage smarter trading, but for them, it's more trading is more money. And you can see this, right? We know about Uber, right? They're gamifying the systems that people keep doing, right? Like, et cetera. I know you're rolling your eyes, but the idea of nudges to predictive data and analytics.
Yeah, but the reason I'm rolling my eyes is because I find his argument incredibly classist.
Well, that's what I was going to say. What is your thought on his argument?
So, okay, the only people who are allowed to have predictive advanced analytics are giant corporations. So let me tell you an example of a predictive analytics for giant corporations that didn't do hot so either. You read about Zillow? I hear their buying program went amazing.
Imploded.
Billions of dollars of implosion. 25% off the stock, what, 25 to 50% off the stock price or something like that, and had to lay off a quarter of the staff because they built their model wrong off of one of the great fallacies of the world, which is when you have a competitive auction type system, it will bid itself up to the point of no return.
Just what we talked about.
Same thing, right? Yeah. But like the key here is that there was no value to do it because they bid up the entire market to the no return value. And so, and then they also couldn't see any of the negative externalities involved, like what type of work did this need, that, and then crews got more expensive. So they would buy the worst houses at the same price rates, and they couldn't recover the renovations. Stuff like that. Like, I don't even know if that's even the whole story. We're only seeing the analysis come out now. That predictive analytics didn't help a giant corporation. People are going to make bad decisions with predictive because they don't understand math, whether they're a single person or whether they're giant corps. And so to say that you are worried about a class of technology that is used to the advantage of large corporations, and you want individual investors to not have access to that because you feel like they might make a bad decision, is the height of classism.
Yeah. I mean, so how are you dealing with some of the clients, some of your colleagues? What's the thought on that? How are they adjusting any of their behavior, or are brands looking at doing different stuff because of it?
Can I propose the question I think you want to ask?
Sure.
I think what you want to ask is that you can have decision bias by looking at predictive analytics and assuming it is the truth.
I like that. Yeah.
How do you lower or create understanding so people can use it in the most responsible way?
Yeah, I don't know what they're going to do though. I mean, it's going to be more and more predictive analytics for all these different platforms. For all these different.
I just told you what they should do. They should have a requirement that there's a confidence in the prediction that's displayed visibly. Just think about like your medication. You buy a medication, they tell you the chance that you might die.
Yeah.
Right, of the side effects, chance percentage of side effects, confidence of prediction, best case scenario, worst case scenario, a disclaimer that it could fall anywhere or even outside of these.
Yeah, but that's such a good idea. That's how you know they're not going to do it, right? So it's like when politicians are in charge, that's not what's going to happen. You'll get some other result or you'll get no result at all.
But what I'm saying here is that when large corporations make decisions, they have mathematicians making the decisions who know that stuff implicitly.
Right.
Right. So what he's complaining about is that he doesn't want to educate. He wants to deprive people of the tools. And that's what I find just sucky.
Right. There's the top-down government saying, hey, like we're just taking this away rather than doing it better. Or we want to take
taking it better, it puts them at a disadvantage.
Right.
Right. So it's just like one of those things of man, the government required us to have rear backup cameras on cars.
Yeah.
This is similar.
Right.
So it's just,
I got you.
You don't talk to me to get you're going to get the reality as much as I see it for me, right? Not the spin of the week. So it's just, yeah.
No, I got you.
It's all terrible, right? Like, sorry.
That's a good point. So what else What else is keeping you up at night? What is keeping you? What is the biggest challenge on your mind these days?
I'm a big fan of privacy. One of the reasons we founded our company is we really like being able to work with marketing data that's what we call anonymized aggregate. So it's not this obsession with chasing down a single human being. The amount of data, math, and everything else involved to do that is incredibly heavy. We're talking billions of rows a year.
Right.
Real-time transformation. And so what's keeping me up at night is getting enough of that data in and then getting marketers to understand that it's not about the last link you clicked or the first link you clicked or the channel. It's about looking at a slice of time and seeing the things that engaged an audience within that slice of time and whether conversions rose or fell, and then making cohorts of them and being like, okay, whenever this happens, this tends to happen, right? So I know to do more of that. But you don't need to go chase down being like, Bob in Illinois, in Chicago, is now in Target. And so I will do this thing. Like, you don't need to do that. And then the other thing is that people need to realize creative matters. And so, like, let me give you an example. Say there's a single keyword on YouTube that 2 people are bidding against. And there are only 100 spots. Really rare keyword. You both post the most boring PowerPoint-like ad ever. One's going to get 50%, the other's going to get 50%. Because they're both just as engaging.
Right.
People need to remember these platforms have 2 things they go for. One, if 2 ads are the exact same length, bidding at the exact same price, all the inventory will go to the one that is the most engaging content to the users of that platform. It is the tiebreaker. Because you would want your users to like what they see, right? So now imagine you have the most incredible creative funny ad against the crappiest ad. You might get 90% and they get 10%.
Yeah.
And so creative is the modifier, almost like you could imagine it like an exponent or something, right? A modifier above standard performance. And so those 2 facts, right? The fact that we have to start looking at this stuff in time series, really to start doing math again as marketers, and the fact that we have to recognize that creative does have outsized returns, but only if it is in the top 5, 10%. So I see all these platforms being like, we will write your ad for you based off all the other ads. You know what's going to happen? I, as a marketer, can't wait for the day till those are deployed everywhere.
Oh, you want everyone else to have that.
You know why? Because I'm going to walk in, and marketers, when they're truly great, create culture. Red Bull drops a dude from space. Multi-billions of impressions of everybody, every news channel following somebody dropping themselves from space. And it's Red Bull, right? Pepsi releases an ad with Kylie Jenner that pisses off everybody because it tries to draft against the BLM movement.
Right.
Which do you think was better? They're both drink companies.
I mean, obviously the Red Bull one was better, but Pepsi still got a lot of attention for it.
Negative attention. Negative attention isn't always good.
So you're not in that.
Their quarterly results that quarter were not good.
Yeah.
Right? Red Bull's results were incredible.
Right.
So I'm saying is that like when you're looking at this stuff and when you're doing it is I'm like marketers run the risk of becoming a sea of sameness if they expect people to do that for them, because part of it is that marketers should want to generate culture and influence. The Dos Equis guy from back in the day, right? The most interesting man in the world.
I love that guy. I don't know why they got rid of that guy.
Contract renewals. At some point it becomes so expensive that it's not worth the payback, right?
Right.
Or the man your man could smell like, Old Spice.
That guy's great too.
Who would have thought of that?
Right.
Right? You're not going to make an algorithm invent that. Like, have you watched algorithms try to write movies? It's one of the best things ever.
Oh, it's horrific. Yeah.
So here's the case, right? Like, you're like, look, if you just want to generate a whole bunch of astroturfy ads that don't generate actual brand equity, go for it. I will eat you alive.
But you talked about privacy, though. So how does that relate to privacy?
They're 2 separate objects. What I'm saying is to be able to do that right. What I want to do is I want to see marketers use anonymized aggregate data to preserve the privacy of people while still being able to look at what's effective. And I want them to start using great creative again. You asked what was keeping me up at night, not if they're related.
Okay. Yeah. So I was just wondering how we got from one to the other. Yeah.
They're just a list of two things.
Okay. They're both keeping you up.
Yeah, I definitely.
Yeah, this is fascinating, Tomás. I appreciate the time. You've always got a real good perspective on this stuff. So I appreciate you coming here, and we can keep going, but we're going to run out of time. We're not going to have anybody left listening, but I appreciate we'll have to do this again. This has been eye-opening for me. Just even some of the data points that you have that I hadn't thought about, that you're right, percentages versus big numbers, like just simple things like that, changing people's perspectives.
10% of a billion is bigger than 50% of a million. Right? Like,
yeah.
Lies, damn lies, and statistics.
And you're living in that world, right? You're swimming in lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Well, I'd say in our world, actually, there's a lot of decent data and a lot of poor assumptions.
Yeah. Well, Tomás, I appreciate the time. This has been fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for coming on, sharing some thoughts, talking about some of the news of the day here and how you guys are dealing with it.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's always fun to talk with you. So we'll have to do it again soon, and we'll catch up again.
Awesome. All right. That was our guest, Tomás Puig, CEO and founder of Alembic, on the intersection of marketing, data, technology. As you heard, fantastic conversation. He's a lot smarter than me, so I'm glad he's the one answering the questions. He's even providing the questions for me. So, Tomás, thank you, and thanks for watching and listening. Politely Pushy. I'm your host, Eric Chemi. We'll see you next time.